This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Labor Day is coming up. Are you traveling for the long weekend? Well, hopefully your commute won't sound like this.
I wrote the directions on the back of that envelope. What?
Road! Road! Road!
When I'm on the road,
Road!
I see stuff going by.
Road!
I'm stuck inside this car on a trip to somewhere far. This highway keeps on going, cars and trucks with trailers towing. Only one small lane is open. See, look, the road is broken. I'm bored. I'm bored. I'm bored. I'm bored. I'm bored. I'm so bored. Are we there yet?
Not yet.
Well, hopefully you won't get bored today because we're going to be talking a lot about highway construction to bike lane installations to the ongoing updates to CT Rail. You could say there's a lot happening behind the wheel here in Connecticut. Today, we get an update on all of those ongoing projects, driver safety, and more. Speeding, speed cams, distracted driving, we'll get into those too. Joining us now is Garrett Eucalitto. He's the Connecticut Department of Transportation Commissioner. Thanks for joining us, Commissioner.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
And listeners, you know the drill. We would love to hear from you. If you have a question or comment about Connecticut transportation and roadways, find us online at Where We Live, email us at wherewelive@ctpublic.org, or give us a call, 888-720-9677. So, Commissioner, it's always busy, but it's been an especially busy year for Connecticut roadways, I think. So what's top of mind for your department right now?
So the big thing for us is making sure that drivers have patience. You heard in the opening there, I think that's the feeling a lot of people have in Connecticut is there's always construction, there's always congestion. It takes me a while to get where I need to go. And, in some ways that's true. So because we're a New England state, our time of year where we can do construction is very limited. And unlike in southern states where you can do construction all year round, you can pave all year round, you can lay cement all year round. Here, we're limited due to the seasons. So we have to jam as much construction in as we can in a short period of time. And so that's why it seems like all of a sudden the orange cones bloom like our state flower, right? And
That should be the new state flower.
yeah. And so people get frustrated, and I get that. But we try to limit the impact, if we're going to take lanes on a major highway, it's usually after 8 o'clock they start taking the lanes and shutting down lanes. So during the day, we'll be out doing mowing operations. During the evening, we take lanes for construction. But it also is a lot of the congestion is not just caused by construction, it's caused by driver behavior. And so they've been passing some laws to try and make some changes to that, but still you'll see some drivers going very slow in the left lane, which aggregates drivers, and they go around. And there's the way our highways were built, where we have lots of exits and off ramps, unlike other states. So we have a lot of people entering the highway, weaving over, weaving off, causing people to brake suddenly. It's like a ripple effect up and down the entire highway. And we in Connecticut kind of treat our highways like local roads, and we get on for one exit or two exits and get off. So those are all factors that really require us to have a lot of patience. So it's something that people just need to be aware of, and they need to hold back the aggressive nature behind the wheel that can sometimes come from that. And because with so much construction going on, we really have a lot of people at risk, both people working on the roadside, but also drivers in a work zone. It's pretty dangerous for the drivers themselves in a work zone. So that's something we want people to be aware of is slow down, put your phone away, and most importantly, don't drive impaired. Those are the key three things we are paying attention to.
Well, we're definitely going to be deep diving to all of those key points. And because you mentioned the weaving and the impatience, and so that leads to a lot of different levels of speeding. So 41% of Connecticut drivers report speeding sometimes. So this is compared to the 30% nationally. So in 2025 alone, there were more than 7,000 speed-related crashes here in Connecticut. And I think it's safe to say that many of us might speed from time to time, depending on how you define speeding. So has this become the new normal in Connecticut, and what's considered speeding?
I mean, technically speeding is anything over the posted speed limit, right? So we design the roads, whether it's a highway or a local road, a secondary road, It's designed by engineers for a specific speed. And if you travel that speed, it will be safer for you if something goes wrong because, crashes occur due to many factors. But if you're going that speed, hopefully that is the safest speed for you to be traveling. And that's how the highway's designed. So anything over that puts you at greater risk, either you at risk or other drivers at risk. I think a lot of people probably don't consider 5 miles per hour over the posted speed limit to be speeding. Technically it is. But I think a lot of people do that by nature just because the lanes are wide or there's not as much traffic. And so they feel like, human nature, they continue to go a little bit faster. And so I think that is a factor, is that people don't consider themselves when they're going 5-10 miles per hour over the speed limit to be speeding. They're like, well, I'm just going with traffic.
Right.
But it's still inherently dangerous for you as a driver, but most especially if it's a local road, a secondary road. If you're going faster, the faster you're going, the more likely you are to kill or seriously injure someone you hit, especially if they're outside the vehicle, if they're a pedestrian, if they're a biker. With the size of vehicles now, we have many more SUVs now than we did 10 years ago. So if you're hit, if I was a pedestrian hit in DC when I lived there, I was in a crosswalk, I was hit by a car, it was a sedan, I rolled over the hood, right, got banged up, but survived. Nowadays, if I was in that same crosswalk, probably would have been an SUV that hit me, probably would have gone under the wheels and had serious injuries. So that's the thing that I think people forget is our vehicles are getting safer for you inside the vehicle. Like the technology inside the vehicle is protecting you. Outside the vehicle, it's becoming more and more dangerous due to speeds and the size of the vehicles. And that's what we need to try to break through to people, to explain to them that speeding really can kill. It kills a lot of people. It seriously injures a lot of people. And so while they may feel safe inside that vehicle, it's the outside the vehicle we need to be concerned about.
Well, it seems like the size of the vehicle, it garners a different conversation because it is getting bigger and bigger, and smaller cars are less popular. And so, you mentioning that it is dangerous to speed anyway as precedent. And I think many people say they speed because they don't want to hold up traffic, or they're simply, air quotes, going with the flow of traffic. So how do we correct that? This sounds like it's not a unique problem in Connecticut.
It's not. It's not a unique problem in Connecticut. It's an American thing. When we compare ourselves to other countries, it's tough to compare us to Europe. We're not built the same way as Europe. But when you compare us to Canada and Australia, they don't have the same speeding problem that we have, even though their roads are built the same way. Their land use patterns are similar. And that is really an accountability issue. They are held accountable when they are speeding. So they have a lot of technology deployments to help combat speeding, a lot of law enforcement deployments to combat speeding. So those really do hold people to account. They get higher penalties on their license, like the points on their license and the fiscal penalties. But it's also road design changes, which takes a long time, but it's something that we are continuing to do. Stepping back from the highways on the local and secondary roads that go through a community, there's things we can do to force a driver to slow down, right? So there are pavement markings that can be placed to cause people to think they're going faster than they are. So those speed markings will cause them to slow down a little bit. The sign that flashes at you saying how fast you're going, all the studies show that clearly has an impact on your speed and causes people to slow down, inherently slow down. The causing some slight curves in the roadway markings, almost to channelize people, causes them to inherently slow down. So those are things we can be doing on the roads: raised crosswalks, speed tables. That's what we're working with municipalities to install. But on the highway side, it's difficult because it has to accommodate huge amounts of volume as well as freight traffic. And that's where we really need enforcement to be something to try and drive down the behavior.
Well, and earlier you mentioned not driving impaired either. So in 2025, there were more than 2,700 impaired driving crashes. And these are crashes where the driver was driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So this resulted in nearly 1,500 injuries and more than 60 people were killed. And this is according to data from the Connecticut Crash Data Repository. So there's been so much education around the dangers of driving under the influence. And I think this is something that most of us have had since driver's ed or, ongoing programs or whatnots that you see. But this remains to be a big problem, it sounds like. So are there ways that we can do a better job at preventing this?
It's really tough. I think it's similar to the mindset with speeding. People think to themselves, well, I'm not drunk. I can get behind the wheel. I've only had a few drinks. It's fine. I'm only going down the block. I'm only a mile from home. I'm okay. But that's often where a lot of the crashes occur, is on that final leg home. And we're trying to address it from numerous different places. There was an effort at the federal level to use technology to stop people from driving impaired by alcohol by using passive sensors in the vehicles. And so there was tests on that front. There's been big backlash in Congress about that law that they passed several years ago. So now there's efforts to undo that. Mothers Against Drunk Driving has really been pushing. It's called the HALT Act. I had it tested in my vehicle. I was driving my state car, and it had the sensors in there, constantly monitoring my breath. It never flagged red because I'm driving my state car, but it was testing out the sensors. Mm-hmm. But it's also, where can we target the source of the problem? They're getting the alcohol and they're getting impaired somewhere, either at home or at a restaurant or bar. So we've been working with the Department of Consumer Protection to do some more education. Any new permittee coming in to get their permit to open a liquor store or get a liquor permit at a restaurant or bar is now going to have to take a course to alert them to the dangers of drunk driving, which we didn't have that in Connecticut before, but other states did. So we're trying to address it there. Also working with law enforcement. That's really, that is the one thing that technology can't catch and stop them right now. We need law enforcement to catch them before they kill someone. That's really the important part. And so it's really a partnership between us, between law enforcement at the state level and local level. But the other big concern, though, is what's actually happening behind the wheel. For a long time, it was everyone's just drunk driving. Well, now we know that's not actually true because we're working with the state toxicology lab to see what's actually in their system, what other drugs, and a huge number of people are actually driving with, they're impaired by alcohol, but they also have multiple other illegal drugs in their system at the same time. But it's important to point out, just because the drugs are in your system doesn't mean you're impaired by it, but it can help better tailor interventions that we need to make. We shouldn't just be throwing all our money at one thing when there's other things going on with individuals behind the wheel.
Right. And the interconnectedness of all of that, right? It's not just one thing that leads to either the crash, unfortunately, or the accident. And so another sort of interconnected problem is distracted driving. And I think distraction can be defined in so many different ways. Although we have not seen as many fatalities, hopefully not as many, but there were 9 distracted driving fatalities in Connecticut last year, and there were more than 5,000 distracted driving crashes in 2025 alone. So what about distracted driving? What are you seeing? And just to sort of side note to that, something that I personally have been observing anecdotally is, you're focused on driving, but then I find myself distracted by trying to maintain my own safety in terms of being aware of other people's driving, right? So for example, just yesterday, I noticed that the car behind me was weaving pretty badly on a roadway. And so then now I'm distracted because they're weaving. And there were so many things going through my brain at that moment.
Yeah. No, driving is inherently very difficult and taxing task. I mean, I don't think people realize how much your brain is doing while you're driving. You're paying attention 360 degrees. And so to be distracted by a cell phone is just diverting your attention from all those things going around you. You're right. You can be the best driver in the state of Connecticut, but the other drivers around you might be terrible and distracted and drunk and speeding. And you need to be cognizant of that. You need to be defensive in terms of making sure that if you see that behavior, maybe go to a different lane and let them get past you, right? But distraction, the distraction numbers, I have no data to prove this. I feel they're underreported because it's tough to prove. You're going to have to get a warrant to get the device, and like in a crash situation, right? The law enforcement officer is not going to be there until after the crash occurs. So they're going to have a warrant to check the device and see what was happening with the device at the same time the data on the black box in the car recorded an incident. So that's always tough. But when they see someone in their efforts to catch distracted driving, I think if you are a passenger in a car today and you're looking around at people passing you, it's shocking how many people are doing other things on their phone, or they have their phone mounted and they're swiping through TikTok or so Instagram Reels, or they have YouTube videos playing while they're driving. And so we've tried to update the legislation to make it very clear that activity is also illegal, because people feel like, well, I'm not using it in my hand, so it's not illegal. It's like, no. That is still illegal. That's driving distracted. So that is something that people need to really take stock of. I think a lot of people say they don't drive distracted, but then they'll admit like, well, I might occasionally glance at my phone. I was like, that takes you numerous seconds, I think like 6 seconds to focus back on the road after you've looked at your device. So you can travel multiple football fields in that period of time. Like you need to pay attention to the road. So I think I admit like there's always that urge when I get a text message to look at it, and I have to remind myself, no, like it's not worth it.
Right. If it's important, they'll call you.
Yes.
Okay. Well, and I think there's been a mixed bag of reactions of how the next couple of things that we're going to talk about is going to help with that, especially with speeding, for example, because there's been a lot of talk about red light cameras, speed cameras, and license plate readers, and growing concern going along with it from residents of how these various devices are being used. And Governor Ned Lamont recently called for a review of license plate readers as well. So why are we seeing so many different kinds of devices being installed across the state?
Yeah, it's they all came at the same time. So license plate readers have been in use for a long time. I think, people just didn't notice what they were or what they're being used for. I think just because of my job, I noticed them on the roadside, and, we pay attention to what's near the roads. So I've noticed them there for several years, but I think they've grown in popularity at the local level. But unfortunately, it's this confluence, and people are comparing all cameras to be the same thing. And there's a lot of confusion. If you watch some of the public meetings, people will be attacking license plate readers and then start talking about the tickets they're getting from the license plate readers. It's like, no, they're completely different things. They do very different, they serve very different purposes. The traffic cameras, or the speed cameras and red light cameras that were authorized just a few years ago by the legislature, we have the most rigid and protective state statute in the country when it comes to those devices. No other state has such a top-down review of the requests from municipalities on how to use them and how the data can be used. So we tried to put in place every measure possible, and that was part of the negotiation process at the state capitol. They can't just put them wherever they want. They have to come to DOT. We have engineers reviewing, is it actually going to improve safety? Is there a safety concern at that location today? And we limit how many can be placed in the community, especially communities that have high levels of poverty. There's limitations on how many in each census tract. And then we also dictate how the money can be used. It has to be used back for road improvements and safety. Can't go into the general fund. They only get approval for 3 years. They have to come back and seek approval again. And they have to show whether it actually helped or not. So it's not a carte blanche approval. I think that's something where it's unfortunate that the backlash against license plate readers is hitting right at the same time Connecticut's standing up its speed camera program, which is there's no doubt in any transportation professional's mind that a speed camera is going to reduce speeds. It's proven to reduce speeds. It's proven to reduce crashes. I'm hopeful we can get through this and better educate people. And we're going to be coming out with more of education about like what are the different cameras on the roads, what do they do. People are now very concerned about the cameras we have at intersections, which are used to trigger the green lights, but they don't record anything, and they've been there for 15 years. So people think they're now like license plate readers, and we're like, no, please. And here's what it does. So it's a lot of miscommunication, a lot of misinformation. It's unfortunate. I think we were all caught by surprise with the quick eruption over this issue.
Well, and with people absorbing more and learning more and gathering more information, and also part of sort of your spreading the word and education, regardless of the Department of Transportation's role with these flock cameras, let's take a step back, and I want to get to the idea that because there are so much concern from residents about the variety of cameras that are now out there, and many are saying that we're turning into a surveillance state. So what would you say to that and their concerns?
I mean, my personal opinion is that there's always been cameras in our society. How that data is used is the important part. License plate readers that are out there have been used for many years. The new AI-based license plate readers that are using information for other purposes or can be misconstrued for other reasons or accessed inappropriately, I think is valid and should be looked at. There should be protections in place as to how the data is being used. The good thing, the confidence I have in the speed camera programs at the local level and at the state level for highway work zones is we made very clear in the law that data cannot be shared with anyone. The data can go nowhere else. It can't be used for any other purpose. It's used to issue a ticket that does not go against your license, that doesn't get reported to the insurance companies, and it can't be used for any other reason. And it's very protective. And so I have confidence in that. We need to get to a point where we can get the public to have confidence in these tools and how the data is being used, because I think there should be valid questions about how is the data being used and what is it being used for other purposes, and it shouldn't be. There should be rigid protections in place onto how data is being used in our state.
We'll be continuing our conversation with Garrett Eucalitto, who's our Connecticut Department of Transportation Commissioner. So if you have any questions or comments about what you're seeing on the roads and some of your concerns, let us know online at Where We Live. You can also email us at wherewelive@ctpublic.org or give us a call, 888-720-9677. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Listen, we've all done it. Maybe we're just in a hurry. Maybe we're just trying to follow traffic. Maybe we're just trying to get around that motorist who seems to be driving a little bit of the leisurely pace. Yes, we're all guilty of speeding, but the data doesn't lie. Last year, there were more than 7,000 speeding-related crashes in Connecticut alone, and this resulted in over 2,000 injuries and nearly 100 fatalities. So with us to talk about staying safe on the road, especially with the Labor Day weekend coming up, is Garrett Eucalitto, who is our Connecticut State Department of Transportation Commissioner. And we're going to start off this segment with a listener caller. Markel is calling in from New London. Markel, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. The local and the highways, I rarely see the troopers on the highways anymore, or locally. I rarely see the police around the towns in southeastern Connecticut managing. You see them in Waterford, perhaps, but anywhere else, I rarely see them anymore. And I think that will help when people see the troopers out. I think that would help to reduce. I've seen some horrific fatalities in the last few years, and they're only increasing. And last, I read recently that when drivers speed above, they spend on an average of $800 more than staying at 65 and below. When I'm from the old school, from the 70s, when Jimmy Carter was around, and you saw more conservation, and especially with these high fuel prices now. So I want to what is your take on that?
Thank you so much, Markel. Lots of nodding from the commissioner here.
Yeah. No. So if you look at police citations for whatever reason, right? There's a database of how many citations are issued by police for motor vehicle violations. Prior from 2019 and before, significantly higher volumes than where we are today. I think over the past several years, police ranks, whether at the Connecticut State Police or at the local level, they've all been struggling significantly to refill their ranks after retirements. I know state police are a few hundred troopers short of where they are targeted to be, and they're really struggling. Their recruitment classes are lower than they used to be, same at the local level. So I give all the credit in the world to the jobs that they do, but they are significantly understaffed. But we also know that lack of presence of law enforcement on the highways and the local roads, the research has shown that has contributed to increased speeds and to, unsafe conditions, which is why Connecticut State Police, Colonel Lockman, Commissioner Higgins have really, recognizing their lack of resources at the personnel level, have tried to use data to target the most risky locations for enforcement. We at ConnDOT, we use some of our federal funds to provide funding to local PDs as well as state police to provide funding for overtime shifts to do more patrols for targeted enforcement of drunk driving or speed enforcement. So it is a partnership. It definitely is noticed by folks, and it's if you're using your GPS system and you get the notification saying police ahead, people slow down, right? Because they're afraid of getting hit in the wallet or the pocketbook. So it is something that is true. On the fuel efficiency piece, 100% true. Your car is more fuel efficient if you're traveling at that optimal speed limit on the highway. But some people like the speed. But if they want to, save money based on the prices of gas and diesel today, definitely drive 65, in the right lane to save money.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm down to save my gas bill.
Yes.
I don't know about you all. So, and Commissioner, earlier we talked about pedestrian traffic, and especially now we're in back to school season. So students throughout the state are going back to school this week, which also means more pedestrian traffic around school zones. So in 2026 alone, there have already been 800 crashes involving pedestrians and cyclists on Connecticut roads. That includes more than 20 fatalities. This is according to data from Watch For Me CT, which is a project that's working to increase pedestrian visibility throughout the state. So what can you tell us about these accidents that typically, what do these accidents typically look like, and how can we avoid them?
Well, most of them are occurring on what we would consider arterials or a state road through a city or a town, where those roads were designed, 60 years ago or more to carry high volumes of traffic. The main streets and a lot. So my mom lives up in Winsted, right, and 44 is their main street, but it's designed to be it's a U.S. route. It's designed to carry high volumes of traffic, and so it was not historically built for the traditional main street that people want to see. Slower speeds, lots more pedestrian traffic, bike traffic. And so that is something that we have been working to undo those design changes from the past, trying to slow down speeds of vehicles to make it more pedestrian friendly. We've started doing more sidewalks and raised crosswalks, rapid rectangular flashing beacons when a pedestrian approaches a crosswalk. Push the button, it flashes rapidly to tell the drivers. But we are seeing we are down this year compared to last year and the year before in pedestrian fatals, but it's still too many. And especially with when you get back to school season, kids out there going to school, we need people to slow down because, like we were talking about earlier, the speeds are the factor in what happens if there is a crash. And so we want to make sure that should there be human error, should a crash occur, that we reduce the likelihood of serious injury or fatal and hopefully reduce it down to just minor injuries or property damage only. That's what we want to happen. And it does require changes to the infrastructure to get there. It also requires people to put down their cell phones. They're more likely to be using their device when they're on a local road and they feel comfortable. But that's also more likelihood of a pedestrian walking out into the crosswalk thinking that they are okay to do so because they have the right of way. And if you're not looking up at the road all the time, you're not going to see the pedestrian there at the crosswalk where they have the right of way to cross. And I think it's really important that people realize that is the most risky location is on those local and state roads through the communities where we have the crossings, the pedestrians, the lots of conflicting activity. And we need to protect those we call them vulnerable users because they are the most vulnerable to injury and harm.
Well, a reminder for our listeners that you can call us with your questions, 888-720-9677. Now I'm going to take a call from John, who's calling in from Glastonbury. John, you're on the air.
Good morning. Thanks for taking the call. Commissioner, I agree with you that the speed cameras and the red light cameras definitely do calm traffic. But the one problem is that you're found guilty and you have to prove your innocence, and that you're working against a monolithic organization to try to prove this. You have to send in an email or you have to call some kind of number and then let them adjudicate it without any interaction. And way too often the driver is found guilty and there's no extenuating circumstances allowed to talk about it. Easy pass violations in other states, you're just guilty and have to prove it. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, about what the citizens can do that, if the camera gets it wrong, why they're not just found guilty and have to just pay a fine and move on.
Thanks, John, for the question. Commissioner?
So I think that's a great analogy. It's similar to the easy pass violations. It's similar to a parking ticket. These are civil fines. It's not a criminal offense. It doesn't go against your license. It doesn't get reported to insurance. It's essentially the statute was crafted to treat them like civil infractions. And it's, the data shows that the vehicle was traveling at that speed. That's why it doesn't apply to the driver of the vehicle. It's totally tied to the owner of the vehicle. And similar to the Easy Pass, you do have the opportunity to present, was your vehicle stolen? You can present that when you go to adjudicate it. You can present that you were not there at that time. The timestamp might be wrong. You have the opportunity to present that, but the technology shows the vehicle is traveling at this speed at this time, and the photo evidence is there. So unlike criminal cases, this is more like a parking ticket and easy pass violation, and that's why it was crafted that way.
And so we have a lot of things that are at the forefront of our minds, of course, and one of them is the several major highway projects that's taking place right now. So this includes updates to the I-91, I-691, Route 15 interchange, and the Gold Star Memorial Bridge, continuing updates on the I-84 here in Hartford. So these constructions, of course, can be very destructive. But as you were mentioning earlier, that here in New England, as we know, the weather is always changing. So you have to go accordingly to the weather. So are these updates to address repairs or address aging infrastructure, improve flow of traffic, or maybe a combination of all three?
It's definitely a combination of all three. So the Gold Star Bridge down in southeastern Connecticut, New London, Groton, that is aging infrastructure. The bridge was built, it's the northbound span on I-95. That one was built in 1943. So it's an older structure. The deck on the bridge, which is the concrete that we pave on top of, that deck is 55 years old. That is very old for a deck. And so this project at the Gold Star, that is to address, we need to strengthen that bridge, the steel. It is our largest bridge. The two spans are the two largest bridges in the state. 60,000 vehicles per day. Right now, for the past many years, it's been a restriction. So oversized and overweight trucks are prohibited from using that bridge. And when you have major manufacturing sector there, that is a huge concern, that trucks cannot pass over the bridge. They have to go a huge detour around. I think it's like a 27-mile detour to the next river crossing. So that one is to strengthen the bridge, and keep it from getting into any worse condition because it needs to stay there for the next several decades. The 91-691-15 project, it's a combination of all three. It is, I was shocked when I look at the traffic data, 260,000 vehicles per day pass through that interchange.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of vehicles.
Yes. That floored me. And it was designed, we built one road, then we built another road, and then we built another road. And we just kept adding on. We kept Frankensteining the intersection, or Frankensteining monster, the intersection. Yes. And so it was poorly laid out, and it's insufficient for the size of the vehicles today, the speed of the vehicles today. And anyone who's driven through there before the construction would remember, if you're traveling southbound on 91, trying to get onto 15, the Wilbur-Cross Parkway, you would back up. And there would be crashes all the time. Same thing the other direction, crashes every day. And so this project is to really address the safety issues, to reduce the number of crashes. I think over a 3-year period before the project, we had close to 900 crashes occurring in that interchange, and that's just not acceptable. And so it's to untangle that mess and set something up for the future. It also was built 60, 70 years ago, a lot of those highways. And so what we see across the state is Connecticut had a huge spike in infrastructure investment in the 1960s, 1950s. All of that is aging out. It's all eligible for Social Security is what I like to say. It all needs, some joint repair or a knee replacement or something. And it's a huge spike in investments that we're going to need to be making in Connecticut over the next 2 decades because infrastructure does age out. Either it can no longer support the traffic, steel ages, concrete ages, especially with our weather in New England. So that's what we're facing here is aging infrastructure.
We still have so many questions about all of the things transportation, but might only have time for one more. But I want to go beyond driving now to talk about CT Rail because your department is working to get some feedback and thoughts from the public about the state rail plan. So this will take place in September, which amazingly is soon. Is there anything you hope to learn from these conversations?
Yeah, so rail serves multiple purposes. People use it to get to work, to get to school, or just to take trips for a weekend, to go have fun somewhere, to go to a concert, whatever. But also it's a huge freight asset. The more you can push onto the rail side, you can take more trucks off the highway side. And in our e-commerce world, freight is exploding in our state and across the country. So we really want to hear from people, both from individuals, how they want to see rail in the future here in Connecticut, what purpose they want it to serve, where they want it to be serving, frequency, volume, but also from the business community. Where are you thinking about your manufacturing and your freight movements? Where do you want to have better freight opportunity? We need to hear from all aspects of the state as to how they view the future of rail in Connecticut. Rail is similar. It is aging out. It was built in the 1800s. The state of Connecticut inherited it when the private companies went bankrupt. So we're trying to catch up and make it undo the damage that the private sector did when they stripped things out. They took out tracks. They took out investment into the rail to save money. And so now we're having to undo that. And it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money, but we think it's critically important.
Well, one last quick one. As we said throughout this hour, we are heading into a pretty busy travel weekend. What do you want our listeners to take away from this conversation and know before they travel for Labor Day weekend?
Plan in advance. You can always look at ctroads.org, which is a live traffic map of Connecticut, all disruptions, all any closures, any significant crashes. But plan in advance, put the phone away, make sure that you and your friends and family are driving sober, and just pack some patience. That's the most important thing.
Pack some patience, folks. You've been listening to Garrett Eucalitto, who's our Connecticut State Department of Transportation Commissioner. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
We'll continue our conversation on all things Connecticut roadways after the break. This is Where We Live. Stay with us. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, we're talking about Connecticut roads, rails, and highways. Joining us now is Brianna Gurchillo. She is a transportation reporter at CT Insider. Brianna, thank you so much for joining us today.
Catherine, thanks for having me.
So you've been listening to the conversation with Commissioner Eucalitto earlier. Anything jump out to you that you would like to respond?
Definitely what jumped out at me was the conversation about speed cameras and ALPRs and how both of these issues have kind of come up and come together at the same time, like the commissioner was saying. I was actually hoping the commissioner maybe could speak a little bit about how the two technologies function differently. As I understand it, ALPRs will capture data about every vehicle that goes by it, whereas speed cameras, I can't speak for every vendor in the world, but as I understand it, that is not how most of them function.
And actually, Commissioner Eucalitto is still with us. Would you like to respond to that?
Absolutely. So that's entirely correct. So all the vendors we're aware of in Connecticut and that ConnDOT uses for a work zone speed camera program, the cameras only trigger if a vehicle is violating. So it doesn't capture anything until the radar detects a vehicle traveling over the threshold speed limit. And so everything else is never captured.
And so, Brianna, because you're continuing to cover this issue, and we've done conversations about it before, and we'll be planning on some follow-ups in the future, can you describe what you're seeing with residents pushing back on devices like flock cameras?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing across the state because the process of the approval process for speed and red light cameras there's a lot of requirements to meet. The law allowing it was passed in 2023, but we're only seeing them come online in the last year or two. And so that's happening at the same time as this big controversy over ALPRs, particularly those made by Flock, is happening. And so as cities and towns are going through the process of passing ordinances and approving plans to do these speed and red light cameras, there's also these conversations about how many flock cameras are in town. And so people, I think, are conflating the two. Police have said that they're conflating the two, and the concerns all come around privacy. When I'm driving around, are all these cameras just following me? And vendors say they are not. What is being done with the data that's being collected about me? Is it being shared? For ALPRs, the state legislature just passed a law this year that restricts with whom data can be shared by local police. Generally speaking, police departments can share data with each other within Connecticut, and the law also allows some data sharing with neighboring states, but beyond that, can't be shared with other law enforcement. I think there's also been some concerns nationally about potential misuse of the data. There's been reports in not Connecticut, but other parts of the country of police officers using the data for personal reasons. And of course, there's rules around that too in Connecticut. There has to be accountability for how the data is being used. So lawmakers, I think, are trying to catch up with the controversy as it's unfolded. And that law, a lot of the provisions are going into effect later this year. But then at the same time, you have the governor saying, how about we do a pause and not roll out more of these until we get some guidance from the state police council. So things are happening very quickly. Yeah. And it seems policymakers are trying to keep up.
Well, and this is certainly something that we're going to keep our eyes and ears on, and curious to hear what conversations you're hearing about balancing sort of the surveillance aspect of the cameras with the idea that the cameras do help the state project or the state protect the safety of workers who are working on roadways or highways, and that they may serve as a deterrent factor, deterring people from speeding or dangerous driving. What are you hearing from conversations about that?
Well, and I'm sure the commissioner could also speak about this too. The work zone speed camera program is kind of its own separate program. Right. There's the municipal speed program, and those plans have to go through DOT for approval. But completely separately from that, the Department of Transportation is doing a work zone speed camera program, and that's being run by the agency. And so far, they've rolled out some speed cameras at work zones at several highways. I think they're maybe only active at a few at the moment. There's on the DOT's website, they have a map that shows where they're active. And from what I've heard from people, they seem to be more understanding of those cameras because they see workers working on the side of the road and how vulnerable they are. Sometimes there's just some cones or some barrels separating them from cars going, 60 miles an hour. And it seems people are a bit more understanding of the need for the speed cameras there. But I don't know, maybe the commissioners heard differently.
Quick reaction.
I agree with her. The public seems to be more understanding of that. I am surprised sometimes when the backlash against the local cameras, even if it's in a school zone, and I get some of the concern as well, school's not in session, so should the camera be active? Well, you still have people that can be killed at that road. But yeah, I agree completely. There seems to be a difference in the mindset about where the cameras are located and their intended use.
Brianna, we got about 2 minutes left, but I still like to get your thoughts on, because we talked about a number of major updates to Connecticut highways. What are some of the projects that you've been monitoring?
Well, definitely the Meriden interchange. That's a big project, a very expensive project. It's been going on for a few years now, and it's supposed to wrap up in 2030. And I think when drivers hear that, they get a little frustrated because there's been this many years of construction already, and they have years more to go. But it is a very large, very complicated interchange. 3 different highways intersecting, so many different ramps. It's a 3-phase project. They've completed 1 phase. They got 2 more to go. So definitely going to be following that. It seems like every few weeks there's a different part of the highway opening or closing. Actually, the work zone speed cameras have just recently come there as well. And I believe those are operating mostly overnight when a lot of work is happening. So definitely keeping an eye on that. There's a couple active projects on I-95, Connecticut's favorite highway. In West Haven and East Lyme, as well as the Gold Star Bridge. So there's a lot of big, complicated projects going on at the same time. But as the commissioner said, I think the DOT's long-term goal is to make driving smoother for everyone. But in the meantime, it requires people to have a lot of patience.
Well, we're asking a lot of that today. It's a pretty busy time for news and transportation world. Brianna, what are you working on next?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, keeping up with speed cameras for sure. And keeping up with all the infrastructure projects that are going on as well. A lot to keep up with. And I think there's going to be definitely more in terms of cameras and how the state regulates them, and whether there's going to be any changes maybe in the new legislative session next year.
Well, we'll be sure to keep updating our listeners on all of the things that's happening in the transportation world. Again, thank you so much to Brianna Gutrillo, who's the transportation reporter at CT Insider. Thank you so much, Brianna, for being on the show and answering our questions today.
Thank you.
And a second thank you to our Transportation Commissioner, Garrett Eucalitto, who jumped in to answer some extra questions. Thanks for your time as well.
Thanks.
I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. Thank you all so much for listening. And I'll be asking you to drive safely, everyone.